Hi, my name is Yvette Kelly Fields. I am President and CEO of Yvette Kelly Fields and Associates, a fractional fundraising company and an executive coaching company for new and emerging nonprofit leaders, or for leaders who are looking to increase revenue by 25% or more while getting 10 hours a week of their time back. I am going to be doing a series of educational videos to help everybody understand or have a deeper understanding of what a nonprofit organization is. Not just what it is today, but its origin story and why it exists. What prompted me to want to do these series of lessons is the many conversations I've had over the years. I have been in the nonprofit field for more than 20 years. I have been the executive director of 2 nonprofits. I have worked at HBCU, a PWI. I have worked at grassroots organizations. I've worked at federated organizations like the Urban League and Habitat for Humanity. So I know what organizations that have a national presence with branches throughout the country, throughout the world. If you talk about Habitat for Humanity, I know how they operate and function, and I understand the fundraising model within those. I understand the fundraising model within a university. I understand the fundraising model within a grassroots organization, within a community-based organization. I also understand it from a faith-based organization. I have had the great fortune of working across a number of different organizations, and over time, I developed my own system of fundraising based off of foundational fundamentals of fund development. I have a deep knowledge of nonprofit work. I'm not a person who fell into doing nonprofit work and never went deeper than just learning how to do an annual fund appeal, a capital campaign, how to do events and have volunteers. I don't have a surface level knowledge of nonprofit work. I have a very deep level of nonprofit work, and I have a deep level of understanding how nonprofits should work and operate. However, what I am seeing as the generation that mentored me is slowly but surely starting to die off. I'm talking about people who are in their 80s and 90s. They are passing away. I encountered these people when I was in my 20s, and they, for lack of a better term, was in their heyday. So we're talking about people, I'm talking about in the 90s. These were people who had came into nonprofit world somewhere in the 70s and 80s, particularly African Americans, because after the civil rights laws started to be passed, more corporate giving started happening to more African American led organizations like the NAACP, the SCLC, and the Urban League and other organizations like that. You start to see more people, black and white, move into roles of nonprofit because the money started showing up. And you start to see people come into it as an opportunity to take nonprofits to a next level from what had largely been, with the exception of universities, largely been volunteer-led, women-led, volunteer-driven organizations, to slowly building them into nonprofit businesses where they have a CEO, a CFO, they have a CDO, they have professional staff running the organization. It's gone from people gathering in their kitchens to do something good to being a formalized, structured entity, unlike anything that had been seen prior to. As we're now seeing yet another evolution in the nonprofit world, we're seeing what I call nonprofit capitalism. I call it nonprofit capitalism because capitalism at some point, probably in the last 100 years, has found its way over into the nonprofit world. And what's interesting is that the nonprofit world was actually birthed out of business people who wanted to do something good and took their own means to do something good. So people, starting with the founding of America, came over to America, had an opportunity to build business. They had an opportunity to live a life they never could have lived in England or wherever else they were from. That's why everybody talks about the American dream and coming here from other countries, because you have a shot. Some people have a bigger shot than others, but you have a shot to be able to build something that can make you money, can make you immensely wealthy, and you can have a life here that you cannot have in any other country because of how that country is structured, because of how they treat money. You could have a lot of money over there, you could build great things, but the state owns the money, the monarchy owns the money. The way they have things structured, you don't get to have wealth. So in America, you do get to have wealth. And at America's founding, it was business people, people who were trying to form a government, people who were trying to create a new structure, and they were the ones who initially started nonprofit type entities. What you would call a nonprofit now, it was just charitable volunteer work. That's all it was then. We're talking about back in the 16 and 1700s. I'm not talking about the 1900s. I'm not talking about the 1800s. I'm talking about the late 1600s coming to the 1700s is when we start to see people who are built up their own livelihood in America, who start to look out and say, okay, as we're building America, there's things that we don't have here that we had over in England that we now see we need to formulate, but we're going to formulate them differently. So they literally birthed what we would consider the modern day charity. It started there. But in the last, I guess that would be 200, 300 plus years, we have seen a switch where the for-profit world has now seen the nonprofit world grow so much, and particularly in terms of money, that they're looking over here like, we've tapped all the money over here. What's available over here? So now more businesses are being created to work with and take advantage of nonprofit funds that normally were set aside for nonprofits. More people are trying to find a way to make products that nonprofits can buy so that they can make money. More organizations are looking at systems that they can create to sell to nonprofits to make money. That's what I mean by nonprofit capitalism, because the nonprofit has become a space that people like, I see an opportunity to make money. That doesn't necessarily mean that the nonprofit is going to benefit from. But because of that, you have more people coming onto boards looking at a nonprofit and saying to the nonprofit ED, who even in today's times, even if over significantly sized nonprofits, are usually people who really believe in the work but aren't necessarily business minded. They have board members who are saying to them, you need to run this nonprofit more like a business. You know, we have $1 million budget, $2 million budget, $3 million budget, but you keep talking about how you need money. You keep talking about writing more grants. You keep talking about having more donor events. And we just don't see that sustainable. You need to have a different business model because there's competition, because there's only so many people who can give, because there's too many other nonprofits. There's all these constraints that are put on nonprofit organizations, and then we don't pay because it's a nonprofit. We don't pay for anything. We don't pay for systems. We don't pay equitable wages. We don't provide benefits. And we think that this is normal. And sometimes are appalled at people who think that they should be paid a certain level because it's like, it's a nonprofit. Surely you should not be expecting to be paid well. But that's the contradiction. You don't think a nonprofit leader should be paid well. Oftentimes, you don't think you don't have money to invest. You don't really have money to invest in technology. You don't have money to invest in marketing. You don't have money to invest in good program data analytics. But you want the nonprofit to operate like a business. Everybody wants a nonprofit to be more like a business, but they don't provide the business resources. And because of that, you really have to start to rethink, what does it mean to be a nonprofit? How should a nonprofit function? And where does a nonprofit get its money? When we say to nonprofits, you need to be sustainable. What are we really saying? Do we really understand that nonprofits do not have a product to sell the same way a for-profit does? Nonprofits do not create phones. They do not make food. They don't do any of those things for the intention of profit. Why? Because when you set up a nonprofit entity, depending on which 501c3 or which tax code you fall under, there are certain activities that are just prohibited from you doing because you're supposed to be out there for the good of society. If you start making money, you know what that's called? It's called a business. And when I say make money, I'm not saying that nonprofits should not have money. I'm saying to have money, to make a profit, is designed in a business to distribute to the shareholders. In a nonprofit, any excess money needs to go back for the good of the organization. That means going into an endowment, going into an emergency fund, and it also means being able to make sure you're being competitive with the work that you're doing because you're here for social good. That's what it means. And because you're here for a social good, you have to think about the things you do to bring in dollars. And whereas a lot of people will say, well, you need to think more like a business and give you the impression that you need to figure out some other way to get money besides grants, besides foundations, corporations, and individuals, because they don't have it no more. That's the language you start hearing, and government's shutting the doors. You're saying to nonprofits, these 4 streams of income, individuals, corporations, foundations, government, they're shutting the doors. They don't have as much to give. You got to change everything. And you got to figure out another way to get money. But for a nonprofit, there are not other ways to get money, because quite honestly, if you get away from corporate giving, foundation giving, individual giving, and government support, you're now looking over here in the area of merchandise and earned income, which cannot be your primary sources of funding, because that is called a business. That's called a business. So nonprofits have to continue to do funding from corporations, foundations, individuals, and government entities, because all these organizations, coming back to capitalism nonprofit work, foundations have money that they have to at least have 5% of it that they have to give away. That's for family foundations, corporate foundations. They all have certain rules that they have to abide by, because that money was set aside as a part of it. They have a tax benefit from setting that money aside. A tax benefit designed specifically for 501c3s. They have to give it to somebody. So to tell a nonprofit you can't ask for this money anymore because they're tired, that's not what you say for a nonprofit. The same thing around governments, like, government's cutting everything. Y'all need to go look someplace else. No. And then to say, individuals, there's just so many people competing, you need to go find something else. No, because there's 20 different places. I can tell you right now, I can within a 5-10 minute drive of my house, there's got to be 20 places selling hamburgers. I can walk to at least 10 of them. Right here, I can. There's one I can walk 3 minutes away, and they're selling burgers. And then I can go across the street, and they're selling burgers over there. And then I can go down a little 2-minute walk, and there's a minute walk, they're selling burgers. I go another 3 minutes walk, they're selling burgers. Then I come across the street, there's like 1, 2, 3. There's like 5 places selling burgers, because there's a Burger King, there's a McDonald's, there's a Wendy's. I got 3 nice little what you would call casual dining places nearby. They all sell burgers. There's a Dairy Queen, they sell burgers. There's 10 places, 20 places within a 5 to 10 minute drive of my house that all sell cheeseburgers. And no one's running in there telling them, hey, there's too much competition, you need to stop selling cheeseburgers. No one's telling that to them. You know why? Because in the for-profit world, everybody believes there's money. There is nothing but money to be made in the for-profit world. Everybody says, well, there's competition, but these are the things you need to do to make yourself uniquely different from the competition so that you can get more market share. No one ever says that to a nonprofit. I have yet to be in a situation where people are sitting there and saying, the reason why you're able to raise money is because you're doing something different from the organization across town. You're either in a location that no one's serving, so that's why you matter. You're serving a population of people that no one is serving, that's why you matter. You're serving a population of people that there's so many that even though there's 5 organizations already serving this population, we really need 10 because the need is just that great. You hardly ever hear that. But the reason why you hardly ever hear that is because the people who are talking are most people who are from the for-profit background, who that's what in their mind, charity means you need to figure something else out because we don't have any more money, versus sitting down and saying, as a charitable organization, we need to start to help frame and shape the words that come out your mouth in a story format that engages people who want to do this work. Because there is somebody out there who wants to give to what you're doing, just the same way these 20 restaurants know that there's somebody out there who wants a cheeseburger the way we make it. We didn't stop making cheeseburgers because Burger King moved in across the street. Because how Burger King makes their cheeseburgers is completely different from how we make our cheeseburgers. It's completely different from how Smash Burgers does theirs. And it's completely different from Wendy's. It's completely different from Dairy Queen. It's completely different from McDonald's. Having a beef patty, sometimes a beef patty, is the only foundational piece that we can say all of us have a beef. We all have a patty. Beef, black beef, we all got a patty. We all have bread usually in there. But how we prepare is what distinguishes us. And we can all be in the same community of, 50,000 people and all be profitable. Somebody might go out of business eventually because some of these people move and there's not enough people to keep all you all open. So now it gets into who's the best burger, who can do the best advertising, who can outlast. And that too can fall to nonprofits. But by that same token, we have to start to have a mindset to understand when it comes to nonprofits. Nonprofits exist for the purposes of serving society. And we have to understand how nonprofits were first created, what their intentions were, and how they were first supported. We have not in the, this is 250th year of the United States. And then we know America was in formation prior to that 1775. Prior to that, we were in formation. So if we understand that, we know that businesses have always functioned like they function. They've always been open to having competition, or they find a way to become a monopoly by buying up all the competition or somehow pushing them out, because it's all about how much money I can get. That's really all capitalism is how much money can I extract from the market. That's what it comes down to. In simple terms, some people are better about it. Some people are more ethical. Some people don't feel the need to try to get all the money. They get it. But that's what capitalism is, and everybody's always understood that, which is why you don't hear people saying you don't need to open another whatever, because people either open it, either survive or it won't. In the nonprofit sector, it is designed to meet a present need that requires a level of support and care to actually impact or change that need that is bad for addressing the issue that's bad for society. And when you're talking about addressing an issue that's bad for society, you're doing something that the market wouldn't pay for and that government should not be doing. That's the third sector, the nonprofit sector. You have the for-profit sector that says there's a market and I can charge, there's a demand, and I can provide a supply for a certain amount of money, and I need to be able to have profit come from that. You have government who's like, we're charged with doing certain things on behalf of the people that we serve, and that requires resources. So we tax and we do other things to have dollars to serve the wider society. But then there's this space over here that has nothing to do with public works or safety, which is what the government is dealing with, and it's not profitable. It's not something that anybody's going to pay you for. That's called the third sector. And when the third sector first was born, it wasn't born with a profit motive. It wasn't born with the idea that it had to be sustainable with things outside of corporations, foundations, individuals, or state support. It was started with the understanding of, we see a need in the society that cannot be met in the for-profit sector because the people who need it don't have the money to pay for it, or the need doesn't have a funding source attached to it. There is no money to do this, but it still needs to be done. So who's going to pay for it and who's going to do it? That's how nonprofits, let's say charitable work, that over time evolved into this more complex world of nonprofits, which my goal is over these series of lessons, is to help educate you about that, to talk about the first charity, why it was started and who was doing it, all the way up to now. So we can have a better understanding of all the different types of nonprofit designations. It's just not 501c3. We can have an understanding of how they're supposed to be funded and who's supposed to, and where the money comes from. The more you as a nonprofit leader, as an executive director, a nonprofit leader, a board member, and particularly fundraisers, because we're living in a time where everybody goes out and says, I know how to raise money. And they think, I know how to raise money. I can do it just like I'm doing it for my neighborhood group. And we raised $5,000 to buy blankets for people who are unhoused. They think in their mind, I can go work at a university and I can go get $1 million because it's the same process, right? No, it is not the same process. It is not the same process. There's some foundational things that you probably have because you seem like you're open to asking people for money and you're willing to do certain things, but it is not the same because there's a whole lot more to professional fund development work, and there's a whole lot more to running a nonprofit at a certain size over time. And my goal is to help educate people, because what I really want to do is when I'm talking to people and they say things like, you need to run a nonprofit like a business. And I literally just did this in a meeting with a client and their board because they had a board member talking about, you all need to look at how you structure yourself differently so that you can get around certain types of laws. The idea that people kind of are caught up in a certain way of doing things with a nonprofit and you need to get more creative. And I said to them, I was like, you are right. There is a complexity of a nonprofit that when you get to a certain level of growth, you do have to look at your business model. But by that same token, you also have to understand nonprofits don't exist to make money. They exist to solve problems in society, and that the funding that comes to them is always going to come more often than not from these sources, because by IRS code, it can't come from anywhere else. And because of how nonprofits were started, it shouldn't come from anywhere else. It's more about understanding how nonprofits can expand their ability to engage more with people, to support the work, because there's many problems that many people see, and they want to see that problem solved, and they would give financially if they understood the problem, if it was explained to them, educated. The same way people find a way to a hamburger place, and when they determine that they love a certain kind of burger, they're not going anyplace else. I will tell you that many of my friends at this age in life, we are not going to McDonald's to buy a burger. When we were kids, the Happy Meal was everything. As a teenager, you ate all kind of junk food, and maybe even to your 20s, because it was just cheap. You start hitting your 30s and 40s, you're not going to McDonald's regularly to get a burger. They might have an advertisement, you might go try it, but the fat, the grease, everything, your body just can't take it. Not those who are trying to be healthier. You're going to go to a fast casual restaurant where you can, I know it's beef, I need a certain kind of cheese. I don't eat just American cheese, like cheddar cheese, like Swiss cheese. I might be better suited going to a smash burger. I might be better suited, I don't even eat meat. I want a bean burger. I want an Impossible burger. People eat what they like. And it's the same thing with charitable causes. People give to what they believe in. And in these days and time, if there's anything a nonprofit executive director needs to be able to do, and a board needs to be able to understand, and all the people that work for the nonprofit need to understand, is how to shape your story so that it connects with somebody who wants to already give. I'm not trying to turn somebody to give to something that they don't want to give to, no different than the hamburger restaurants are not trying to appeal to a vegan. They can't appeal to a vegan. A vegan's not coming there. If they got salads that don't have meat on them, they might come there, and even then they're only coming there because their friend is there and they're starving. They're like, okay, well, do you have a salad? I'll just eat that. And they kind of pick through it. Because they really don't want it, because they already know, like, y'all not into making salads. You're not making the salads like I make them. That's how a vegan is. And by that same token, places like McDonald's and Burger King, well, I can't say Burger King, but most of them, they're not trying to get the vegan. They're not going to start putting a lot of stuff on their menu to try to attract you, because it doesn't make sense. Same thing with a nonprofit. A nonprofit that helps children has donors out there that want to only help kids. A nonprofit that helps to alleviate food, there are people out there that only want to help alleviate food. Is there a time where somebody wants to alleviate food and they want to help children? Yes. People actually give to more than one cause. They can give money to help with hunger. They can give money to help with education. But if they really don't care about cats and dogs, they're not giving to cats and dogs. And on the other side, if they love cats and dogs because they really ain't into people, there's nothing you can do to give them to that. That's the part that I believe in today's society is missing. A true understanding of how nonprofits started and how they should be operated, and really understanding what's the business model for today's nonprofit that is a charitable nonprofit, and understanding what type of nonprofit board you're on, understanding why did they have that designation, looking at where they traditionally have gotten funding, and then start to become a person who understands future projections of money the same way you understand future projection of sales. In business, there's an unbelievable number of conferences that the first thing they do when they open up the conference is talk about the future. Okay, here's where we see money come from. Here's where the trends are. Here's the way to operate. In nonprofits, you go to a couple of conferences, and if you don't have the right person up there talking, they get up there sometimes and give you the doom and gloom story, like, we got the war and this, that, and the other. But those who really know their stuff in the nonprofit world are just as savvy about saying to you, things have shifted over here, so we're going to tell you how to shift over here without leaving your mission, but making this move so that your organization can continue to have the funding that it needs to be sustainable. That's the type of story, that's the type of conversations I sit in. How do we continue the revenue model that we have? Because it's not broken. It's just a lot of people don't understand it. A lot of people have not been educated about it. And we understand that when people become uneducated about it, when people start to understand it, all of a sudden their nonprofit starts to have money. And that's just what I do. I work to educate nonprofit leaders about how a nonprofit should work. I work to educate them about how you need to set up your structure in terms of your revenue. I educate them about all the streams of income that nonprofits have the opportunity to pursue that's within IRS guidelines. And I say to them, we do not do mafia fundraising. You do not have to lean on people. You ain't shaking nobody down. You're not hitting people up. We're not pitching to people. You know, lots of business people, you know, you got to have your pitch. You mean you have to have your story? You need to find a way to help people connect. I know a lot of people who are entrepreneurs or donors, but they like stories too. They really, really do. Because, you know, here's the thing. Entrepreneurs have always been donors. Entrepreneurs are the ones who started the nonprofit sector. Entrepreneurs didn't just start donating to nonprofits in this year. But lots of times when people just think because they're an entrepreneur and then for the first time they're sitting on a nonprofit board because they don't really have understanding how nonprofits work, they really think they're doing something when they come to you and start saying to you stuff based on entrepreneurial thoughts, and you say, you're right. Part of what you're saying is right, but also you need to understand how nonprofits operate. And also understand entrepreneurs have always been in the nonprofit space as donors, board members. It's not new. It's how nonprofits started. And I want to give you an example, because this is a part of me educating. So I did all my thing. If you made it this far, you are learning. So a part of my education is going to be sharing with you the first nonprofits that started. I want to even talk about universities, like what they were rooted in, how they started, how they got their money. We're going to talk about how when the first time nonprofit term came about, when the term 501c3 came about, all the different types of 501s, all the different types of nonprofit entities. We're going to talk about the purpose of foundations, why they even exist. We're going to talk about when did the government start getting involved in supporting charitable work. We're going to talk about all that. That's going to be my goal. So today, I'm going to just take some history. When I was going through my master's program for philanthropy, I learned an incredible amount, an unbelievable amount of stuff about how philanthropy started. So that's why I kind of knew exactly where to start, where to look, and find stuff. There's books in my house from when I was in college, because I still held on to some of that. I have just binders of things. But I do love Google. I am a person who uses some AI. I try to be mindful of it, because I just know, like anything else, certain tools take more away from us than they give us sometimes. So I try to be mindful. But in using Google, I am on a website called wholewell.com, and they have on here 17 historical nonprofit moments you should know. You can go on here and find this. It's wholewell.com. I'll put it down in the description. It was by George Weiner. He created this, and he talks about these key facts of when nonprofits started. And I'm going to just share with you one of them. And over the next, however long it takes me, I'm just going to do an educational video after another. Part of it's because if you come across my channel, The Nonprofit Boss, which is, you must be here because you're watching it. You come across my channel, I want to be able to educate you. If you're talking to somebody and you looking up something, I want to be able to pop up and say, here's the facts, where I got the facts from, and you can look it up for yourself. But it has, the first fact it talks about was that the Union Fire Company in Philadelphia was founded by Benjamin Franklin. We all know who Benjamin Franklin is. In 1736, it was the first volunteer-based organization in U.S., and it was focused on fighting fires. Now, here's the thing, because when you look up this Union Fire on BenjaminFranklinHistory.org, so there's a whole, there's a ton of societies dedicated to Benjamin Franklin. This is just one. But on BenjaminFranklinHistory.com, when you look at the history, it says on December 7th, 1736, now you have to remember, this is before we became a country. It's 1775 was when, 1776, 1776 was when we became a country, right? So we're here looking at, on December 7th, 1736, this is about 40 years before we become an actual country of the United States. But we're over here building, we're laying the groundwork. Benjamin Franklin co-founded the Union Fire Company, also known as the Bucket Brigade. Now, we always hear about the Bucket Brigade. You know, you watch these old movies and you see people out there lined up with buckets, and they, you know, you talk to Bucket and somebody's all the way down to where the water source is, and the bucket comes across to put out fires. It was the first formally organized all-volunteer fire company in the colonies and was shaped after Boston's Mutual Fire Society. So prior to this, Benjamin Franklin had lived in Boston, Massachusetts. He had come to Philadelphia, and having known how they dealt with fires up in Boston, came to Philadelphia to recreate that same system. Now, if you go back and look at Boston and look at their actual history of how they formed their thing, they had looking at this history, it says the city of Boston experienced major fires in 1653 and 1676. You have to remember, feel how you want to feel about them, but right now in history books, Christopher Columbus came over here to America. We know thought he was somewhere else, but he bumped into a part of America, what we call United States now. And over time, that's where the United States started to form in those colony areas along the East Coast, Boston, Massachusetts, along those areas where they started to have settlements. So we're talking about in the 1600s when they started building buildings and they started having fires, and the fires just consuming whole structures, whole offices, because everything was made out of wood. They were just starting. They were just figuring some stuff out. So after the fire of 1676, Boston purchased a London pumper. Remember, all this stuff is already over in England. They've already figured this stuff out. They've been over there for thousands of years. America's like, okay, we're creating a whole nother thing over here. So they already have a whole fire situation covered over there. We got to cover it over here. So when they started seeing these things are happening, okay, we need to get a London pumper. And look, they're still trying to figure out forming up their government, right? We don't even have a president of the United States yet. George Washington is not president. They're still even forming this. They're still under England at this point, right? They had 12 men who came in who were the first paid firefighters, which was in the early 1700s. And those paid firefighters were the ones who started working to deal with the fires, and they needed more people beyond those people. So concerned citizens banded together and formed the Mutual Fire Societies in 1711, okay? So we got a paid group, but then we have a mutual society. What does that mean? What's a mutual society? A group of people who have a mutual need who come together to help one another. This is one of the first mutual societies. And it had members of the club who rushed to help battle the blaze. Each society had approximately 20 members, and the mutual fire societies became social as well and as protective associations, setting a pattern for organized volunteer firefighting groups. So, and there's still some firefighter-led fireplaces now, but more are paid, particularly in urban cities. So here's the point. These are people who already have occupations and jobs. These are not people who are sitting around looking for an opportunity. They're already working someplace. They're already trying to build out in this new country, and they automatically see a need around this places keep burning down. We need to do something. So we got a small group that's paid, but there's a lot of fires. So another group of people just came together to say, okay, as a group of people, we're going to look out for each other. That's what the mutual society was. Okay, look, your house is near my house. Your house is down there. The 10 of us, if a fire break out your house, we all going to run to your house and help put the fire out. If a fire break out at so-and-so's house, we're going to all run there to put out the fire. This is a mutual aid society. Nobody was the executive director. Nobody said, well, where are money going to come? Did nobody say about, well, we're going to write a grant for this? None of that existed. But what existed was there's a need. At this point, there's nobody who's saying they're going to pay for a fire group. I can't sell you fire service. Over time, insurance and stuff will come along. But right now, there's nobody we can pay to do this. We're still formalizing. But we all have enough understanding that water puts out fire. And we all have buckets. Nobody has to go buy buckets. We all have buckets. So we're going to bring our buckets and other equipment that we already have in our homes. And we're going to help each other keep out fires. And at the same time, we're also become friends because, we're looking out for one another. When Benjamin Franklin duplicated that in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, when they said, okay, that he saw the mutual aid societies, how they worked in Boston, but they were just for each other. Look, the 10 of us, we got each other. If we see somebody who's not in our mutual society and their house burning, it's just going to burn. We don't help people outside of ourselves. Benjamin Franklin's like, I want us to have a volunteer group that wherever the fire breaks out, we help each other. That's just how Benjamin Franklin saw it. And so that's why when he created his, the Union Fire Company, he created his with the entirety of society in mind. And it's interesting because if you look at the BenjaminFranklinHistory.org and the history in the Pennsylvania, the BenjaminFranklinHistory.org, and then also when I was reading about the Boston group, Firehistory.weebly, the history of volunteer firefighting, you look at that, then you'll see how there was actual rules about if you want to be a part of this volunteer group, you need to have your own bucket, you need to bring this. If you didn't follow certain guidelines, there was a whole thing. This is just the beginning of how what we call charitable work began. Because this is a group of people who brought their own resources together. They didn't look to anybody else to provide resources. They looked among themselves, individual donors, and said, we see a problem, we all want to come together and address it, and we're going to take our own resources to do it. There are many nonprofit organizations right now, somebody's sitting down and they're looking and saying, I'm just tired of seeing kids not have clothes. I'm going to start buying them coats. They have the same spirit as Benjamin Franklin. I'm just going to start buying coats. Or they're looking at 5 other friends who got some means like, hey, didn't your kids have some coats? Ain't they grown? Yeah, are coats still good? Oh, yeah, they only wore them twice. Okay, there's a group of kids who need coats. So I'm going to ask all my friends to all provide whatever coats you got in your closet. If you ain't got no coat, could you go buy 2 or 3 coats? We got 20 kids that need coats. That's how nonprofits start. That's how a nonprofit starts. Somebody looked and sees a need, and they say to themselves, okay, I see a need, and it's bothering me, and I want to do something about it. And I start with my own resources because I want to see the need addressed, and I want to see it addressed sooner than later. It would be years after this thing with Benjamin Franklin before we get to any of what we do now. Nonprofit capitalism, which is what I'm seeing creepy now, is that people are starting nonprofits for the purpose, for the express benefit of how can I get money? It's not like I see a need and I want to start with myself first. And then over time it grows into something that requires other resources beyond me. We now have people starting thinking in their mind, a nonprofit is the business model to make money. And that's not why nonprofits exist. Should nonprofits run like a business? Yes, this is how they should run like a business. They should have structure. They should have standardized practices. They should have professionals running areas that require a certain level of acumen. You should not bring somebody in who's like, oh, I think I can run a nonprofit. You know, I like people. You know, I've done a few things to run $1 million nonprofit. You shouldn't do that. I have seen people bring folks in to run $1 million nonprofit and they spend all the money. They don't bring in any other money. And then they're absconding and gone because nonprofits don't act like a business in that way. That's really what we're talking about. But we're going to see over time, when I do these series of educational videos about how nonprofits started, this is just the beginning. Benjamin Franklin is just one. There are so many other people. We got Benjamin Franklin. There's a ton of men, women, people of various diversities who all started nonprofits first with the thought of, I see a problem and I see the need to address that problem. And I'm going to start with my own resources to do that. Volunteerism is something that is very unique to America because over in Europe and other parts of the world, the church took care of all those things. Or they have been around long enough that a lot of formalized systems had come up. America was shaping something different and something new. And I think this is the perfect time. It's the 250th anniversary of the country. It's a good time to have a lesson about how nonprofits started. And I'm just going to keep going and talking about it until I feel like I can have enough videos that when people start saying stuff like nonprofits should operate like a business, I'm like, look, watch my series of videos so you can really understand when you say that, what you really, really mean. You just really need to understand that. Also, if you're new to the nonprofit sector as a nonprofit ED and you're just like, this whole nonprofit world is confusing to me. I came from government sector. I came from the for-profit and I don't have a clue. But somehow you've become the board chair or you've been asked to be over the development committee and go get money and you have no clue. So then you start trying to bring in everything you learned from business and say, okay, what we need to do a pitch deck and we need to go do this and we need to go do that. and somebody tells you, yeah, we're a nonprofit, we can't do that. And then you're confused, like, well, I don't understand. We need to change. We need to get educated first. Learn nonprofit organizations in all the ways. And then start to say, okay, now that I understand it, here's where I can see I can help this nonprofit maintain its financial sustainability. All right? And it's not, and I will tell you, by the time you're done with this learning series, you will not only say, yes, we need to go talk to individuals, corporations, and foundations. And if there's government sources that we feel like does not cause us to have to compromise on what we do, we're going to go after those dollars too. Because all those dollars were created to serve nonprofits. They really were. There's government money that was specifically designed to do work that only nonprofits can do. That's why they have the money allocated for nonprofits. Foundations have to give the money to nonprofits. They have to. They don't have a choice. They can't give that money anywhere else. Corporate foundations the same way. And yeah, I know corporations have other ways of giving money, and we'll get into that too. But corporate foundations, family foundations, they have to give that money to a charity. They can't keep it. You can't sell them t-shirts or phones, okay? Individual giving can be quite significant, not just because of taxes, but because people want to see something done, and they can't go into a store and buy, they can't go into a store and say, I want to help somebody who's unhoused have housing for the next year. There's not a store they can go into and do that. They have to work with a charitable organization to do that. They just do. All right? So thank you for tuning in. If you want to learn more about how the nonprofit world works, keep watching. It's the 25th anniversary of our country. So this year, I'm breaking it down.